Thank you all for coming out on this rainy and cold night. I am so happy to see a lot of the same faces here that we've seen for the last two talks, and I hope you keep coming to all of the rest of them. Warren Barker is the only speaker on this list that I cold called. And he graciously accepted, and I didn't know much about him. And then last week, when all of the folks came from Mystic, all of the kids who were working in the shipyard said, "Oh my God, Warren, he was my teacher. You're so lucky that that's the person that you have coming." So I felt immediately relieved and confident that I made the right cold call. So without further ado, I will turn it on over. Thank you.
Right. So I'm the senior instructor at IRYS in Newport, and the senior in many ways. And it's been 20 years since I started there. And so I thought tonight maybe I'd start 20 years ago. And I think that little subtitle there, "Do Not Discard," is actually the title, isn't it? It does sort of give you a sense of value to these wrecks that you see all over the place, and people have given up on them. And at one point at IRYS, we had 2 parking lots filled with wrecks. And it was useful for me because you could go out and survey them, and the students would write up a professional survey. However, now those parking lots are revenue streams, and they aren't filled with boats. And the boats come in, they're donated and sometimes sponsored. And so tonight I just wanted to introduce 3 of those builds and what they afforded for finding out the avenues for information, how to do it, and history, and all those things. So I think I can make this thing work, and off we go. Well, look at that. I must admit, and I admitted to Katie, that I was nervous about coming to the real deal, Essex, Mass, where they built these extraordinary ships. And I thought, and Harold Burnham's here, Burnham, the real deal. And I'm going, here I am in a school and somewhat of a dilettante, and he's lurking. Well, we bumped right into him trying to find this place. And it turns out that he's nice as I remember, because we have met once before. And thank God it was him. So that's Coronet, and Harold knows all about Coronet. But in the background, this schooner lurked in Newport, and it was always sort of tapping at the door, like, "Can I come in now? You've talked about me forever, and why don't you have those students restore the boat like the school was initially intended, that they would create these learned apprentices, and they'd slide into the Coronet project and do the job." Didn't quite transpire, and we seem to have ended up with a little bit smaller version of boats. And but we also ended up with people like Brandon Gotting, and that's Mark Tax in the back. And I put him up to this, of course. Could you write "why" on a piece of paper? Piece of plywood. And it really should have been "why not?" And the reason it says "why not" is on the other side of that boat, it says "do not discard." And it's Elizabeth Meyer, who started the school and put in the bill for everything. She wrote it. And so I had to persuade Brandon here, who was actually Chappie. He had a t-shirt that said Chappie. He had several of them. He ended up being Chappie the whole time he was there. And I said, "I think we got a good project here." It was a little worse for wear. This is the Herreshoff Buzzards Bay 15, and it seems a bit askew, even to my eye. Matter of fact, it was definitely very askew. And we had to say to young Brandon Chappie that, this is a very special boat. And Elizabeth is right, because it was designed in 1899 by the man, Nathaniel Herreshoff. And this picture sort of says it all. The thing is gorgeous. They referred to them as mini Columbias. And what about it, Brand? Let's do this. This is a good idea. And we also have to talk about the history. That's the idea behind the school. And I said, so there have been several iterations of the design, and it finally evolved into the Watch Hill 15 of 1922. And by this point, 20 years later, we have done a Newport 15, Buzzards Bay 15, and a Watch Hill 15. So I do see Brandon. He has a successful cabinet business in Boston, and he was a wise guy, and that usually means he's smart and fun to work with. It's a challenge, and he's also successful, which is really good from my point of view, because I don't want them all to be anachronisms like myself. So the information, I kind of knew where to get the information. Talk to MIT. And the drawings are as beautiful as the boats quite often. And so I persuaded Chappie that we've got the info. There's the original in sale plan. Of course, I've shown you the Marconi, but we were stuck with that one, which I think is far cooler. This is the Book of Offset. It's not for that particular design. This is another one. It would say 503, I think, on the offsets for the 15s. But talk to MIT. You might get the idea in this little talk that all roads lead to MIT. No, some roads lead elsewhere, and I'll talk about that. Okay, it's from the get-go. So we have this twisted hulk, and so that's me 20 years ago. That's not a cigarette in my hand, and these are my proteges, and off we go, and we start lofting, and we try to mimic the techniques of the Herreshoff techniques themselves. So I every time I've tried to second guess the man at the end of the Herreshoff, I've been caught. And so in the end, we pretty much use all these techniques, a mold for every frame, and build all this tooling, build one boat. We were smarter than that, and then off we go. We did sort of compromise on this boat. We did the mold for every frame, bent the frames around the molds, and squished the molds into the boat. And now you'll probably say, well, why would you ever want to do that? Well, the idea is, it's every other frame. I'll probably notice that. The idea is that you squash them and the boat's supposed to now resume its original shape. And of course, if you look at the tops of all those molds, they sort of don't seem very organized. And so we set it on a platform. And once again, it's quite emphatic about the fact that that thing is totally screwed up. And that really all should be touching. And so that's why those guys are milling around in the back wondering what we're supposed to do now. Well, you push and shove some more. Basically, we stripped all the structure out of the thing, kept some planking in place to, I think you're keeping the soul of the boat in there with those few planks. Somehow we've captured the idea of the boat, and on we go. This is all old school stuff. Just we spile, take the bevels, back out the planking, all old school. It's as traditional as you can get. And blammo, see how fast we can plank? These are wizard students. And we have 3 boats, so I'm going to be moving. I hope you don't mind. But anyway, there's Mark. He actually put in the shutter right before Christmas. He was in such a hurry that he drove the edges off the adjoining planks, and we had to redo the whole damn thing. But it was exciting anyway, and it was the quickest build we had at that point. So there it is, all planked up. And now we've got that shape starting to emerge. And I am a total sucker for boats in this stage. They're just a piece of sculpture. The coolest thing. They don't have to do a thing, just be beautiful. Little interior structures starting to come together. And this is sort of the idea behind this talk. So this is Fiddler at Mystic Seaport. It gives us an excuse. You can go to the museums, check it out, take pictures, record, and the students trundle along. And I mean, it's great. It's such an excuse to do cool things. So there's Dave, Walter. They think this is cool. And actually, Dave is absolutely relieved that the combings didn't break. Here's Chappie again. And I'm pretty sure he's saying, how come I'm the guy under the boat? Well, he was the youngest and more malleable, I guess, than, no, he's just the youngest. So you go tune up the heel of the mast fits, Dave's working on the canvas, back to the museums to find the detailing. I think this is Awani at the Herreshoff Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island. So we didn't go back and forth. I promise some of this was organized, but I certainly went back and forth. So there's Dave doing the same thing. It is so cool to see the real thing. Then you go do it. And that's sort of the idea behind the whole thing. So we have to fit those baubles, they call bow chocks. It's starting to look a lot better than that first picture. Matter of fact, it looks twice as long as it is. And the moment of truth. So they're very cool boats. My father sailed them, he raced them in Marion Harbor, and he said the wettest boat ever. I don't know why people are so excited about them, but he did admit they went like crazy. So there he is. Here's this young guy. After all, it didn't seem so bad. And what's coming is a sail, and that's the deal. We have to have a carrot at the end, and that's launch day. Get it done, you go for a sail. You'll see there are exceptions, but still, that's the idea. You got 300 people looking at you if you don't get it done. How about if we get it done and go for a sail? And they seem to move when you offer them that. So there they are, first sail. This was a good project. And there he is, see? Smiling. There's the future right there. The idea that he's 20 years older, I was old then, but he's 20 years older, it sort of blows my mind. He's like an adult or something. Anyway, and the instructors get to go for a sail too. That's the big payoff for us. We get to sail this thing around. We don't know for a couple of days, and sometimes we teach sailing in it, and that's I think the Wheeler Estate in Jamestown, Rhode Island. Okay, so MIT. I mentioned that's where the drawings come from. That's since 2003 and 4. We launched that book in 2004, and at MIT they have the Hart Nautical Collection, and it was in about the same state in 2003 as it was in 1993 when I was building this boat in a lair in my shop. And I was kind of glad of it because Kurt Hausbach, who was relatively new at that time in 1993, he was driven to make the information available to everybody instead of having it sort of, you had to be a scholar, you had to sneak in there, you didn't want to mess with stuff. He wanted it out there. And so and it really was his life's vision. And I so handed to this guy that he wanted this beautiful uh, repository of information available. And yes, when I went there, he and I would look at these little patterns of anchors and stuff and get all excited. And you're not supposed to do that at all. And he said, well, it's cool you're here, but we've got to do something about that. So initially, he got a grant and he cataloged the whole thing. Well, I couldn't understand it, but he could. So I'd drive up there and he'd find the stuff and I got to use it. This is where he went with this vision. I have to say, this is 2017. The students, we all go up there and we look at the original drawings and very excited about the original drawings. He was very excited about digitizing everything. And we would listen to him and see several people looking at the drawings. We'd listen to him for a while, and he was always so accommodating as curator. He really super accommodating, but he had allies in his pursuit. In the catacombs, this was the museum on Mass Ave in Cambridge. There's a table behind that young woman, and so that's Evelyn Ansell. And she got a grant to photograph all the drawings, digitize them. Kurt, this is what he dreamed of. And there she is. And not only could she take the photograph, she could remember the picture and the drawing and the details and the avenues that were generated just by seeing that one drawing. Lucky Kurt. Now she's the curator of the Herreshoff Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island. So they have not just drawings like MIT, they have Nat and his fathers and his grandsons and sons, half models. And this is her baby. And she knows those models. She knows the drawings that go with those models. And she's in charge of the whole shooting match, and she's in charge of Halsey. I'm hoping he might not have wanted to hear that. But anyway, we were so lucky because you have Halsey show you around the models, and he has anecdotes that no one else would have, and how he used such and such a model as an inspiration for this. And so anyway, think of these museums, the one in Bristol, the Herreshoff Museum, models some drawings, most of them at MIT, a super collection of original boats, and it's such a valuable resource, it's terrifying. Mystic, so I haven't mentioned Mystic except for, I think it's Fiddler. Alarians there, a lot of very significant Herreshoff boats. They have the patterns. So you've got these museums with various things, and you have to sort of sneak around and tap them and find out which one wants to accommodate you, quite often the quickest. And but we do go from museum to museum. Then they've got all the stuff. You, the world, have this. And there's a guy named Klaus von Linn. He's Swiss. He's precise, super nice, crazy knowledgeable. He built a website for you to pursue everything Herreshoff right in the comfort of your own home. And that's the title of it. You can find it at herreshoffinfo.org. Try that first. Watch out for my facts. Anyway, Klaus he's built this thing. He went to the Herreshoff Museum. He took each model down. He read what Nat or whomever wrote on the back of it, and documented it all. And then he built this website that you punch in a number, 503, and all of a sudden you have everything to do with a particular design. I just happened to put this page up because it had the half model on it, and it shows how the half model is tweaked for Maynard Braid's boat with the keel and all these different things. It is crazy what you can do when you pursue this stuff. And here you are, you guys are here. I'm talking about computer stuff. It's not really me, but man, is this stuff useful. So one way it helps you, you go back to MIT, actually, and look into the Hart Museum, and you have Libby Meyer show you drawings you thought you might want to see because you looked them up on Klaus's thing, and it does help things. And now they've moved a whole shooting match to Medford, and we're going to go see Libby in December. But my students will sneak through this stuff, and they're more adept than I, and see the real deal. It's an amazing thing. Some people's family boats are lost in hurricanes, but lost sometimes ends up in quotes. And if you have Klaus's information, you might be able to discover that your family heirloom can be resurrected by someone with a checkbook and the knowledge of IRYS. And we happen to have the original. And so Anita's mom, that's her boat, living again. So
thank you.
Thank Klaus. He's the guy. She was able to look it up, and here we are. So I wish he had been around and kept a teacher who was pretending he knew stuff out of trouble. We got a call. There was this hulk out on Martha's Vineyard. It was a Herreshoff launch. You guys that deal with Herreshoff, you're on Narragansett Bay. Come, we'll give you the boat, and you restore it, and everybody will be happy. So Mr. I thought I knew about Herreshoff shows up and looks at the thing and thought, there's something strange about this boat, but pretty cool, and maybe I could talk him into it. And it had a lot of detail in that light framework of the Herreshoff boats, the combings. And I admit, I was kind of trying to push my own deal and get to do it. But there were a lot of elements that just kept reminding me of the Herreshoff launches. And then there's this beautiful, see, it's double planked. It was a beautiful build. And then the molded shear strake, which I think I might have. Yeah, see the swell at the top. Well, this is a Herreshoff drawing of that very detail. How could you go wrong? It has to be a Herreshoff. And so I fell for it. We had done Corsair about, don't worry, that's not a stable. Corsair a few years before. We saw the detailing. Come on, this has got to be it. This will be us. And it had free shipping. So we're in nonprofit, free shipping, our kind of deal. So guess what? We decided we'd do this thing. Those straps, as soon as you remove them, the thing would just, pieces fell off just trying to get it to that. So I had some empirical data, and I went to see Kurt, and we pulled out 1 billion drawings of Herreshoff launches. And he started to shake his head very early. And I'd have to say that I'm sort of smitten with the drawing, so I get going, and I thought, oh, Kurt, this is cool. I wonder, some way we're going to find that launch, because I know it's in here. And I said, maybe it's that one. Look, it's got the double cockpits. It's got to be something along that line. And maybe it's a secret one. He's sure, Kurt, by this point, he said, listen, there's no silver bullet. You're not going to find that launch. And I said, what about all those little notes they write all over those drawings? I'm sure somebody put one that said it's just about as long as a 25-foot tape. I'm sure it'll be right there in red or black or blue. Maybe it's Bubble, the family lunch. And this is the one I actually really wanted to build. And so I tried to persuade everybody. Well, Vicky and Benson put Bubbles' shear and half breadth on the floor, looked at me and said, this is not your boat. You're done here. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, which brings up another point. If you want the key to the, not the city, but key to Klaus's thing or anything to do with Airshall, try to find a boat with one of these plates on it. It immediately tells you its whole pedigree and who owned it and why it's important and what year and everything about it. Absolutely everything. You have that number and go to the Klaus's site, you know. They're so important that I feel that this is what you should do to them. Just bolt them right through the stern of the boat. Nobody will mind, I'm sure. I said this once at the Airshall Museum, and you could, in the back, there were people fainting. They're so sensitive. Don't worry, it just sat on top of it. Anyway, and I'm sorry about this. The mouse got away from me, and I don't know how that happened, and I was afraid I'd lose the whole thing. So that's an addendum. But anyway, we were stuck, and there's a curriculum. So what are we going to do? We need to find a boat, looks like Herreshoff, is a Herreshoff, and we're going to build from scratch. And they drew one, well, actually, I think Evelyn said more than once. They drew the set of lines for the 330 launches. And guess what? We decided that's pretty cool. That's Resolute, a 330 launch, a Mystic Seaport. How about if we take that hull and we'll scale those lines and we'll build that hull and put the stuff from the old boat in it. Nobody says no because nobody dares. Anyway, we thought, okay, here's the construction drawing, but why not document everything in the original and stick it in that hull? I'm not a naval architect. I needed a proven hull. We kind of like the Herreshoff thing, and so we did steal a bunch of elements from it. It had a sharper forefoot and a almost plumb stem. We snuck that guy right in on our lofting. Max is very excited about it. And the stern was built, it has steam bent framed around the stern, and that's a little bit different than Herreshoff, but we fired it right in. And so we lofted a 330 and set up all the molds just like we were supposed to. But we slid in elements from the original boat. Those full-length longitudinals, you don't find those in Herreshoffs. But we thought, we got this boat, we'll make it, it's gonna be a hybrid. Anyway, I had a really good gang. Steve Lublitz, he runs Wooden Boat Works on Long Island now. This gang, they were motivated. And Sam, where is Sam now? He's 6'5", that's short Sam. There was tall Sam, he was 6'6". We worked together. Anyway, he's a really cool guy. So double planking, the off shear strake, and it's quick build. These guys are fast. Look at them go. Anyway, over she goes. Like in the small boat shop at Airshop, we do everything like they did it because we think they're cool. And now that is a teaching, what is it, instrument? I never got to cut a boat in half, full length, ever before. It is the coolest thing. So all that info is about to go into this boat. And I don't know, I really wanted to keep it. I wanted to stick it to the wall of the shop. They never listened to me, but what that was a gas. So we did it. We stole some more detailing from Corsair notes, and here we are putting it together a la Airsoft, and it was a fabulous build. It's all the frame spacing, all this stuff that was longitudinal, all the stuff came out of the old one, but we really just we went with a proven hull and nice as Austin's arm. It was very distracting, but the kid was a wizard with metal. And that's the thing about that place. All of a sudden, you'll have this wizard, this who usually doesn't have a clue how good he or she is. It just they pull it off, and they're surprising themselves. And thank God they're there for me. Anyway, it does get really frantic. Here's a familiar head. And you do get there. See that sharp forefoot and the plumb stem? Pretty cool. And there they go. That was it. So, what you won't find on Klaus is sight. That's the hybrid out there. And here's Resolute. Resolute has a number, plate, history, all that stuff. You're not going to find that about that up there. However, it was nice looking enough for some guy, Doug Broadwater, to buy it and take it to his Adirondack Lodge. And it sort of just tools around the lakes up there. And I have to say that's better than a dumpster. Finally, we're getting there. Don't fall asleep yet. So, as I said, the parking lot's filled with all these boats, and some of them just talk for themselves or speak for themselves. Excuse me. This is Ruida. That's all I knew about it. Ruida 5. That was in the little blurb from when it was donated. And Elizabeth Meyer, all the boats at one point were painted with house paint. She just thought they should look a little bit better. And it was just striking in itself. And it was, they started to have interest in restoring in about 2006, I think, but it was slightly delayed, to say the least. But that shape, I got all excited about it, and I thought I was excited and terrified, to tell you the truth. This thing was big from my point of view, not around this place, but from my point of view. And it had a little bit of history. Now, this isn't my fault, how out of focus. These are family photographs. The director of this school was approached by that guy. No, wait, generation off. That guy's name is John Leonard, and that's his wife. And I am not sure about the young men because you'll see why. But John Leonard's son walked up to Clark Post, the director, and he said, my family owned that our boat that's in your parking lot, and I have some pictures of it. Would you be interested? And well, of course. And so these pictures emerged, and here they are. They raced it like crazy in the 60s, and they cruised it. And there's not a whole lot of accommodations in this thing. And you see their crew was quite young. And I think this might be Dana, the guy that approached and he said, my dad had this boat and we were pretty little when we sailed around in it. And maybe you would restore it sometime. And my father's John is still alive, and that would mean a lot to him. Can you imagine cruising in that thing? I mean, the mast, we can tell you about the mast later, but yeah, but how cool. So anyway, Mary, the unassuming wife, she wrote this book about keeping track of Dana and Buzz, the sons, on board the skinny little racing machine. Okay, the word is we've got a sponsor, we're going to do the book. And now, Warren, it's August and school starts in 3 weeks. Find out all you can about it because you're about to get underway. And so Frank Conahan worked with Kurt Hasselbach at the MIT Museum. And we had been in correspondence over Larian and a few other things. And so I emailed and said, Frank, I got a problem. I don't know a thing about this board. I'm supposed to be an expert on it. I have to know everything by the 6th of September or something. And Frank, super nice guy, he dives into the archives looking for Louisa 5 and finds this picture. So this is in the Charles Foster collection. It's a Willard Jackson photograph of Rowena 5 in 1926. That's cool. However, I think it looks cooler in this one, 1929. So this was photograph 2 from Frank. And that's about all he had. Oh, he had a blueprint. So now I'm thinking I've got it. No sweat. There's the blueprint. It did really come out badly, but, and I'm sorry, but anyway, the key part of the blueprint is this. So the boat was commissioned by Mr. Begg. So we've got the owner's name, and it was built by Lawley and the builder. So that's a lot. We still don't know enough to build a boat. However, and I have to admit, I don't know how this happened. There was a, well, you're going to find out, but I don't know how I ended up in the IRYS library. I might have been asleep in the stacks or something, but it turns out that these are scrapbooks and they're all yachting clippings, and they are the guy named Leonard Fowle collected all these. He made scrapbooks like crazy. And in that group of scrapbooks, so the Boston Globe, most of them, were little articles in the head, Rowena 5. So these are Leonard Fowle Sr. on the left and Junior on the right. You might want close-ups, but this mess was not made by me at the time. This is about a week ago. Our new librarian, Francis Frost, who is a wizard, he said, well, you've already got your little sticky notes in there. Why don't we find out about these guys? So I actually asked them to. And so there they are. So Leonard Fowle's, this is Leonard Fowle Sr., Leonard Fowle Jr., and his father, granddad, was the managing editor of the Boston Globe. He was the yachting editor. When he became ill in the early 30s, young Leonard took over. He's the scrapbook guy. And Francis Frost, being very observant and literal, said, they seem to have abnormally large heads. Well, lucky thing, because those heads not only wrote a lot of the articles, but Dad could actually do handicap rules in his head. Leonard just was all those scrapbooks, he built them. And in those scrapbooks, I want to give a plug for the Boston Globe because he would appreciate it. In there it says, I think Rowena 5, the new addition to the fleet, right under there, stop share, you'll discover that it says something about Rowena 5. And I don't know how I discovered it. I don't know how I ended up in those books. But it also tells you July 1926, and Francis told me that Sonny liked stamping stuff. And there all of a sudden, our mystery boat, Lolita 5, the fourth R and the fifth rating craft owned by Commodore Sidney Banks, it all is lovely and motors along. And I think it's bigger in the next one. Yeah. So last year, the design for Burgess, Swayze, and Payne. Guess what the Payne drawings are? MIT. At any rate, Mr. Beggs like Mr. Curtis's 20 Raider Ellen. And all of a sudden you've got, we don't know a thing about Lolita 5, but now we know that it is practically a reproduction of Mr. Curtis's boat. How cool. So there's Ellen, 1925, and it talks about how it's different than Dandelion. It's now we're reading about, you've got Dandelion, you've got Gossoon, you've got Yankee. All these names start to float around your head. You have not a clue which one's doing what, except that Ellen has inside ballast and no form of keel, and we have a boat that looks a lot like everything they're talking about. And when you get to that point, all of a sudden mentioning Ellen, and you have a million drawings of an R boat that's just like the one you've gotten. Blammo. Now you can do the job. And so it had everything. And see how it says Dandelion? Well, they're all the same. There's Ellen's little alteration. It's ours look like that. We'll go with that. We're going to take the information and fly. Mast, you sure it was for Dandelion? Sure it's the same as our boat. We decided. Actually, I measured a whole bunch of stuff. It had to be. But we had now the key to that city, and off we went. So the boats, you're going to notice the boat doesn't move much, hardly at all. And they decided we'd take the lines off. We didn't have the offsets. And there's Andy Chapman saying, Warren, you have about 50 slides to go through, keep moving. But we are reading the boat so that we could draw it on the floor, come up with mold stations, and start tweaking, pushing, shoving this hull. We didn't make molds. We actually pushed and shoved. And see, we poked the bow up, the stern's all pulled up. We've got what we think is a nice shear line, all that stuff. We just racked the boat and pushed it from the inside. And we had readings from our lofting, but we didn't put molds in. Is that all right, Harold? Okay, good. And anyway, there it is. Sort of, it's on poppets. It's been tweaked somewhat. And then we very carefully and gently took it apart. And these are all they have electric cords, Harold, so these are all right. And now came that's Dave. I work with Dave now. This crew, they competed to see how dirty they could get, not change their clothes, and how many hours they could put in. And they were wired. They knew from the get-go, this was a big project. We're going for it. So more pushing and shoving. We believe what we did is we took the planking, it's a double planked hull. We took the plank off and we would fasten it to the preceding plank so it made a rib end so that we could steam new ribs inside the boat. And it's become quite flexible. Now it's set up. And we started to replace some of the smaller pieces. They're very proud of their work. That's Bryce in the right, Andy. Kiss me, I'm a leprechaun or something. I don't know what it says. Anyway, I know it looks daunting. Is that a stern feather? I've heard that term. It's so small, it doesn't seem that way. Anyway, so then every other frame is replaced. So everything is to keep the shape you've generated. You know, see that strut just picks up that ribband. There's any fine tuning, and that's a lot better than it looked before. So, all framed out. We're just going to blast through this. We started the planking, as I say, double plank mahogany with a cedar inside liner, all back fastened. I'm sorry to say it was all done with 5200 between it. So the next group like us is up the creek, but we also started down from shear. You can see the rabbit, so that it works with the lining. Down we go. From this angle, I have multiple shots. Everybody uses GoPros, all that stuff. Well, I'm too old, and this is what we got. So down we go. And that's the liner going in, and that's Toby. It's coming. And they use this tongue depressor type of spiling. I think it wastes battens and tongue depressors, so we don't use that anymore. It's a Long Island thing, I've heard. And there, the last plank going in, those two wedges are so we could keep the liner in. And I have to say that right at this point, I disappeared from the project for a month, so you don't actually see this plank go in. I'm sorry. But it sure looked cool at this point inside. These floors, the floors came with the boat. Somebody had started, they took a month to fare out. They're wretched, poor Toby. And just to guarantee they actually did it, there it is, all planked up and it'll be pretty nice. It's funny, this angle looks awful in the stern. Yeah. So, deck structure, I could stand right here. I think I discovered why I could stand here. And so we have a sequence. It's when you have 8 people on one boat, there's a scramble, and the boat's only, I don't know why, it's not very wide. So covering boards, we started the planking, deck planking. Here it is, it's just shiplapped, zillion fastenings, with Doug, Andy, Bryce, Toby, Brian. I don't know who this guy is. Oh, that's the other crew. They're working on a 12 now. Anyway, what I found about this gang is there were leaders, but they couldn't lead too much because I get nervous and threatened, and they would just motor, and that was good because there's a ton to do. So we've got it decked. Now we're canvassing the deck. Now we need some accommodations in case people want to go cruising with small children. And the housetop, framing. So it's starting to come together. And it was a cool arrangement with the tow rail in that it captured the edge of the canvas, but the covering boards were bright outboard, nice looking. And then that little metal band covered the edge of the canvas forward. I stole that idea from the 6 meter they did at Newport. In this business, it always seems to me a good idea to steal whatever you can. So Andy made that, very proud of himself. Sort of bizarre, but we saw it in that photograph, the 1929 photograph, we think. Now you've got this elaborate in the stern, that the tow rail just fares right in, around it goes. Andy did that. But it's, as they say, it's a long, skinny boat, and everybody piles up in the cockpit every time. Dave was in charge of the things that actually count. You want to steer. Tim Conway came in to put the name on. I'm sorry how pixelated this is, but you get the idea that we are now approaching the moment. And Bryce is saying the moment, I guess it is the moment to go. So we got a trunk and up the door goes. So Rowena was one of the few boats I've ever encountered that actually looked as big outside as inside. Usually, the boat, I built a 30-foot powerboat, my shop, it was immense. And we build huge things, but it was huge. And then it went in the water, it's this tiny little thing, and it's very sad. But this one seemed to retain its length the whole time, and the shape, and be totally cool. And so there's the moment of truth. There's Dave. They bought new. He and Bryce bought new coveralls for launch day. I don't know what on ducks or something. And there's the guy. So it is bizarre how a team will coalesce. You know, they wear coveralls. They do these strange things. Each sort of has its spot. The dynamic with this gang was rare. You know, it had to happen, so they made it happen. And you took something like that and brought it to that. Yes, you know it's not done right. It's okay. And there's John Leonard, the guy that cruised it with his family. Dana, his son, said, they're going to put it in the water. And he showed up and sat down, thought this is the coolest thing ever. So, and that's Chris. I think that's a miniature Chris. I'm not positive, but he seems pretty delighted with the outcome too. So, you're probably asking yourself, did you sail it? Well, I got the boat on the same tack. So I know we've skipped some extraordinary things, but that is a cool object. Yes, there was this miracle happening on the mezzanine. Why I couldn't take the picture down to the boat like that? Because Felix, who was a student, he had to leave for a while, he's German, wizard. He came back to make up the time so he could get the certificate and initiated the building of the mast. And nice German precision and execution. And so the crew would drift up and help them glue and back and forth. And the thing, it was a construct in itself. I mean, the metal, and we actually got professionals. I scaled that photograph of the 1929 mast and then used the drawings and came up with spread a location. That's totally taboo, but then we got it all engineered by a pro, and it still broke the spreaders, but it looked pretty cool. There's some about this boat, everything's too long, too skinny, but very, very cool. For Jen, I work for Jen, she's all right, she's alive, but all that rigging and the mast and all that stuff, one day she just fell asleep on the companionway cover. So I didn't think you guys would want to go through all that, the making of the mast, because I didn't want you guys to sleep on whatever artifacts are around here. But it looked good, no matter what angle you looked at it. I think about 20 minutes later, the second spreader up broke, and I learned a lot about geometry that day. Anyway, scale. I told you that coming to Essex, it's a way to build real boats, big boats. The whole idea of a whole town building a boat and everybody turning out, and it blew my mind. So I was kind of nervous. So I thought about scale a lot on the home front, and I put AD in a white jacket because I figured he was like management or something, and I think that all the story ghosts would kill me for that one. So I took them out, and these guys are still working away. But scale is a, sort of a sense of perspective, and somehow that saw got really big next to that giant boat, and I really do think that scale, it's not really the scale of a project, it's what these guys learned from it. And so I think it's okay to work at a smaller scale. Sometimes on launch day, you wish the scale were a little bit bigger. This electric launch did float and it did go away under its own power, but it was terrifying launching it with those guys in it because it kept going down and the waterline disappeared and half the top sides disappeared. We just, when's it going to quit going down? And finally, off it went, and Chris in the stern there, he was quite relieved. Sometimes scale, I mean, this is an A&R digging. We had a pancake. It was a total wreck. And Gus got in it, and the thing just rode like a dream. And then the young woman, Sarah, that worked with, she got in, and it was like the boat knew, okay, I'm going to be on my marks for whatever structure gets in. And I still think he's as satisfied with that boat in as much as a 35-footer. And then there's real small scale. And these people that blow my mind, and this happens to be my brother-in-law's basement, but when you can make a companionway ladder like that, with fingers like that, it just amazes me. And there's a real reason I'm showing this to you. I mean, that cannon, when you drill a touch hole, it will work. Not bad. So Henry was an orthopedic surgeon. He had an accident. He compromised the vision in one eye. He had no depth perception. Well, it's hard when you're a surgeon. Where am I headed here? And so he built models to regain his depth perception. And so who cares how small this stuff is? Everything is on its way to the next thing. It never diminishes the result. It seems to me scale. And the idea that what's his name, Roger Hamage, the mystic, he's a shipwright, and then he makes exquisite models. But now they've got him sighting the shear line on the dummy, and he's telling them when it's right. So it's all this training of the eye. And scale seems to not have a lot to do with it. So you have a young guy like Tom who can really see and has super concentration. And you need a nice pattern for that Herreshoff rudder fixture there. He just has the focus, the talent, the determination. And yet, what's he doing? He's putting new chain plates on the Susan with constant, right? The Mystic Seaport. And so scale, whatever scale. I can do scale. And there's Sam. Yes, he's in the bow. This was a surf boat, a rescue boat from the Humane Society. We did a replica. And there's Sam working away in the bow. Yet he has the job, with others obviously, of rebuilding the stern of the dummy. And so small to big. I know I'm hammering this thing to death, but it just seems these skills can be any size, and they switch back and forth. There's Ophelia cutting a stem for 12.5. And there she is at her job at Mystic about, I don't know how many months after graduation. They'd gotten cold. Could you how about tuning up the valve of the dump? Oh, no sweat. The pieces got bigger, the scale changed. She still looks fairly diminutive compared to it. But as Tom rise to the occasion, she rose to the occasion and basically built that stem. So something works as you both between all these applications of the discipline. The idea that they put the whole town in these schooners, basically, and the picnic baskets, well, Ansel mentioned that or described it or something, when the whole town turned out when they launched these boats and people could get on them and go to Gloucester and you know, under tow, and we can only get 17 in a boat with 3 life jackets, and but it's the same idea. Everybody gets in, goes for a ride, and so I think all these things celebrate the abilities, the talent, the techniques, the methodology, all these traditional things that we try to keep going. And if you have someone pointing you at the future, then maybe we'll just keep those techniques and methodologies going. And that's all I know. Is that enough?
Talk to a man about a horse.
All right, you're a great crowd. You sat through all that. Right.
Man,
How fast was it? Oh,
you're
not so
right.
bad. Wow. All right. Well, thanks for showing up and being patient. I'm only slightly excited about making all these things.
How long is the program from start to launch? How long are the
So
students
these
in these
boats are on the
programs?
second year of the program. So they started, usually you come to school the day after Labor Day and you have to do safety training in Title IX and all these things. And all of a sudden it's October and you start walking. And then you launch the first weekend in June.
Okay.
And this year I learned, much to my chagrin, it's actually May 31st. And they don't understand what a couple of days mean if you've been up all night. And so it can be quite compressed.
Yeah.
And the mast for Ruida, I noticed, I looked at properties and the photographs, and the photographs of sailing the boat were in August. They built this exquisite boat, launched it, and then we rigged and finished everything. It was August. Yeah. And Dave, with whom I work, said, "Yeah, I've never been for a sailboat that boat." I have, but a bunch of the guys never went. And so we couldn't feel too committed on that. I told him in Southwest Domain, I spent 3 years building a 42-foot ketch, never gonna sail. So it happens, but it's still cool just to put that piece of sculpture in the water. It's a whole new ballgame once it touches the water.
What was the idea behind the curved mast on the I-boats?
Oh, I was afraid you'd ask me that. It looked sexy. I don't know. Because the S boats have them. They look beautiful, and sometimes you wonder if it's sort of transitional from your gaff rig and where the center of effort was, and whether you could move it, you get that efficient rough line. And the other, now that I think about it, the other thing is quite often they are adjustable. We either have a mast that you could move the mast in an arc, and so you could change the draft in your sail. And there's a part of me that thinks that having it curved gives you more flexibility in the shape of your sail, but pure conjecturing probably rubbish. You might know, I don't know. Yeah, they look cool. They're spectacular.
What's in the shop now that's interesting? What's notable coming up?
Well, we've scaled. And we have two 12.5s right now. And Resolute is in the shop, the Mystic Seaport. During the pandemic, we lost 11 weeks. And so those projects, the smaller one, the Colonial Digging got finished, but Resolute is still in the shop. And then we have two 12.5s, one from 1914 and one from 1941, which is kind of cool. It sort of bookends the era of the Herschel 12.5s, and so you see how they change and stuff like that. But the 12.5, right now seems to be sort of the size that it can be completed. And I'm not quite sure why, but what's really cool about a 12.5, A, I want one, and B, that it's all of the Herschel thing and a little boat. So it's super complicated for a small boat, but it's the real deal. So we go through all the same methodology, and you get to go to all the museums. Oh, look at that, they're doing that. And that's always, that's fun. And then
How
now
many
that,
students typically in class?
oh, it varies, because I've had, the biggest, Bill Kenyon can tell you all these things, but I think I've had 17, yeah, how many in your? 7. Yeah, and, I have 12 now. Usually the first year is bigger, but, they 10 in the first year. Did you recognize Sarah? That's Sarah. Now you're famous.
Warren, forgive me, I feel like I should know the answer to this question, but I don't. Why do we now 5,200 the dinner and hour planks together?
Why?
Why, what did they do before? And why do we do them?
They used a bunch of stuff. Shellac was a biggie. Yeah, I think, we use 5,200 because it comes out of a tube. It's sort of what the runabout people endorse. It is, I mean, the next person that does this will stomp on your grave. But it's a fabulous product. I mean, if you want something to stick together forever and have some flexibility, that's the way to go. But there's what is it, McClay, Philbrick, and I hope they're not watching. Anyway, MP&G in Noank, they actually mix their own shellac and make double planking compound, and it's modern and we went for it.
But it does screw over the person who has to make a repair next time, and aren't we usually trying to think about the next generation? It made such a mess. We wasted so much. So gross.
I don't know, it makes a great ribbon when you cut it off, because it's all stuck together, and by then you don't lose stuff. Not a hard one, you know.
No, I was just curious, when you're repairing these boats, is it always the intent to go back to the original design, the original piece, or do you ever like approach one of these things where we go, wow, so and so mucked around in this and did this and this and this, and that's kind of an interesting repair. Should we save that? Well, what?
Yeah,
Could we
still a
take
lot.
this thing and change it? And
Yeah,
does that ever happen? Or?
yeah.
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 So there is.
They steal ideas from the last guy, but a lot of times you're told emphatically that it didn't work, and see with the hearsay stuff, he designed the system and the boat, and all his guys are trained that way. So we tend to just, okay, we're gonna do it.
So it's pretty faithful.
Yeah, and people want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then again, then you bring up 5,200. So it's always a juggling match, but it's really hard, that Corsair, that launch, that was, a partial. And so we replaced the backbone, all the framing, about a third of the planking was original, and combings, there's a bunch of stuff. But guess what failed? The shellac in the top side afterwards. And you just, oh, come on. We try to do what you're supposed to do, save as much of the original fabric as we can, and it comes back to haunt you. That's same with Resolute. Because it's a Mystic Seaport, whoa, we try to keep as much planking as possible. Man, it took forever piecing all these things together, and you never know if it's as good as it was. So I don't know, it's a real problem. The 1914 12.5 that we're taking apart now, owned by the same family for 110 years. And it's a study in use equals making. If you don't use it, you won't maintain. And so they had a system, 4 of them, they bought 4, and it's the Forbes family, and they bought 4 at once, and took them out to North Shore Island. And so they go in the water, and everybody sails around. They go on a little railway, just for them, on their little cradles, and they go into the boat. 110 years of the same thing. And yes, in the 90s, they had the a couple of trances replaced, cans, stuff like that. But for us to take it apart, the backbone's gone. Each plank is at 4 or 5 screws now. And it's time, but it's awful. You just want to keep it a little time capsule and build a new one. But now they're getting the new one. The time capsule, my cousin who married into the family, he's got a little museum out there. And so he takes the transoms and he's in the backbone. And Evelyn Ansel, I've got a backbone for her because she wants one of the original 20 had a different section peel. She wants that. She's building a parts museum at the museum. So we take the part out, hand it to her, and feel less guilty. I feel it's gonna be a nice program.
How did you come to make this your life's work?
Backed into it. That cousin.
Okay.
My cousin's 8 years older, and he's a mechanical wizard. So we make a mini bike out of exhaust pipe, and I'd acquire it. I followed him like a puppy dog. So they even went to the same high school. He hated it. I didn't know that. He's older. Anyway, but he always admired my father because my father would read National Fishing, Maine Coast Fishing at the time. And there's John Gardner writing these articles, and my father, Harriet, I'm going in the basement. And he'd go down and go around with epoxy and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And Harry thought that was cool. Well, I went to Wizard College, and I came out, the plastics weren't my future, and I had to make something. I couldn't stand it, so after furniture school, I went to Maine, and it's totally cool. They're upside down, they're beautiful. You turn into furniture, and then you take this, this beautiful piece of furniture, and you chuck it in salt water, and then it takes a whole new life. And once you start, you're kind of screwed. So I just kept going. And this place, I was the real deal. I could build some in my shop, but I just needed health insurance, and I got this whole gang of people that I don't have to figure out how to pay, and I wasn't good at that. Managerial finance and I in college didn't go well, so I just stayed with it. Really nice gang of cool people.
Is there a boat that you really want to restore that you haven't, like something it's not out in the parking lot yet?
Well, they cut up one. I wanted to do an international one design, and they cut it up and it disappeared. I thought that's a book sale, but so it goes. Now all I want is time to. I got a dead 12 and a half in the backyard, and I got all the tooling, all the sales, all the hardware. Get the cobwebs out of my shop and do that. Enough. Do it with young people. They can move.
Do you have a say in the class? You have second year students? So they've already been accepted in the first year, they've gone through the first year?
Yeah.
And then they come to you?
Yeah.
So you get whoever, there's no reviewing them.
They self-review sometimes and decide they want to do something else. No, yeah, and then you just go for it and hope. A lot of hope. You have to just have faith you'll get there.
How long's the program?
2 years.
2 years.
But so they have their first year, and then they go on an externship, work for somebody for a summer, and that's great because they find out that tools with cords really can get a lot done faster than your hand plane, and then they come to me, and I make them go backwards, but I don't actually. They seem to quite often be a little bit more mature, and they have sort of seen the challenge across the giant hall where we build the boats and realize, hopefully, they realize that you go for it and show off this piece to your family, or you slack off and you look silly at the end of the year. In the fall, it's hard to get the idea of it being silly will come back to haunt you, but they get it about a month before launch day.
You said one young man went to be a cabinet maker. What do most of them do when they leave? They go to different areas.
I mentioned it, that the anachronisms like myself, you don't want to make them. So I'm always trying to suggest to them that you're going to learn something you can use, but be super flexible. Yes, you might get a commission for a whole set of cabinets or a circular staircase or a house, and you know how to make stuff. If that's going to pay the bills, you got to go for it. You might not do what you're doing here, but you'll have an understanding to take with you. And so that's what you're hoping for.
You always said the best book carpenter is a boat carpenter.
Yeah, yeah, and then if they take the systems course at my school and the boatbuilding course, the boatyard's dying for them. You can do a lot of things. Systems is crazy good course. That's what I'm doing. I probably put the wires backwards, and that's okay.
What happens in the first year?
Excuse me.
What happens in the first year?
Oh, the first year they restore the beetle cat, and so we have to have a dead beetle cat to rebuild, restore, and create a new one. And so it's actually worked out very well for Beetle Inc. because the beetle cat company still exists in Wareham, Mass. And we were enemies because we'd have students restore these beetle cats, put them in the market for cheap. And Beetle Cat was the only new one. And so it was in the wood boat industry, you don't want enemies. So Bill Womack, who owns this Beetle Cat, he and Michelle figured out that they would build a storage facility. They would store your Beetle Cat, paint it, get it all ready, launch it, and then retrieve it. You know, so with a check, you could take care of a lot of the ills of owning your own Beetle Cat. And that's the moneymaker for Beetle. And that allows them to build the new boats. So it's the mix of things that it allows them to do that. And so we're putting beetles back into the system. And that's just how Bill described it to me. Your boats are coming into our system and make me money. So we're all friends. But that, it's a fabulous teaching tool because the planking forward is a little tough and, you know, it's a round bottom boat and it's great. And they can get it done in a year. So then they come to me and get all scrambled. We have to make everything from scratch in mind. So we generate all our own information, all our own patterns, all that stuff. Beetle, I mean, the first year they have beetle pattern for a lot of things. Like the theory. All right, well, really glad you all showed up.